Namaskaram. Namaskaram to all participants. Namaskaram, Dr. P Rammanohar ji. We are extremely grateful to have you here at this 12th day of the Faculty Development Program. The Vishaya for today is India's knowledge systems with respect to health and life sciences, and what better way to explore IKS than Ayurveda. And extremely grateful to have you here. Yeah, I would just like to introduce you. I have the privilege of introducing you, sir. Dr. P Rammanohar ji has received the BAMS and MD in Ayurveda degrees from Bhartiya University, Coimbatore, and Rajiv Gandhi University of Health Sciences, Bengaluru, respectively. He has been contributing in the field of Ayurvedic research since the last 30 years. He was the principal investigator on the Indian side of the National Institute of Health at US sponsored research study to scientifically evaluate the efficacy of Ayurveda in rheumatoid arthritis. The outcomes of this study was published in the Annals of Rheumatic Diseases and Journal of Clinical Rheumatology and won the prestigious Excellence in Integrative Medicine Research Award. He is participating in cancer initiatives for development of integrative oncology in collaboration with Central Council for Research in Ayurvedic Sciences and National Cancer Institute, US. He has, to his credit, more than 100 publications, including research papers published in peer-reviewed indexed research journals, as well as contributions in chapters for several books. He has participated in more than 20 major international conferences and over 100 national conferences. He served twice in the Communications Committee of the International Conference on Integrative Medicine and Health, ICIMH. He was honored with the Ayurveda Marga Pravartaka Award by the L. Mahadevan's Ayurveda Foundation in 2014 and the Vaidya Sundarlal Joshi Smriti Sodha Puraskara by the Maha Gujarat Medical Society in 2015. He is presently serving as the Research Director at Amrita Center for Advanced Research in Ayurveda, Achara, attached to the Amrita School of Ayurveda managed by Amrita University. Thank you so much, sir, for coming here. And without further ado, I hand over the session to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the warm welcome and introduction. I'm very happy to be here today and to share some insights and thoughts about, the tradition of Ayurveda, which is the indigenous healthcare system of India, and which has a remarkable evolutionary history spanning, many thousands of years. And in fact, we can't really trace the origins of Ayurveda. That itself speaks of its antiquity, because we can't see through the mists of time. Even when the first textbooks of Ayurveda that we have today, they're already very well organized and a systematized form of knowledge, which presupposes that there were, traditions existing even before, which these texts represent. But we are not able to, study them because they are really lost in the, the flow of time. But the most remarkable thing is that Ayurveda continues to be a living tradition, and it is also staging a kind of resurgence globally, and that is quite fascinating. And I think that's very fascinating about the Indian civilization also, that it has this kind of resilience and has shown this timeless nature of its fundamental principles and tenets. So I will be making use of a slide to have our discussion so that we are focused. So let me just, yes. Are you all able to see the slides now? Yes. So our focus is today looking at Ayurveda as a knowledge system, especially India's health and life sciences category. And for this matter, Ayurveda The word Ayurveda itself, in one sense, means, the knowledge of life, or we can even translate it as life science. And this is quite an interesting aspect of this term, because if you look at other medical systems, they are mostly known as, Chinese medicine, traditional Chinese medicine, TCM, or traditional European medicine, Western medicine. It's very interesting that the word Ayurveda does not mean medicine at all. Ayurveda means the knowledge of life, the insight into life. So that shows that Ayurveda has a very broad, focus and perspective. It's looking at life itself. And the actual goal of Ayurveda is to make the best out of life, for which health is an indispensable tool. This makes the focus of Ayurveda very different from other medical systems, where the entire focus is only on, managing a disease. And especially today, the focus of medicine is very much restricted to managing a disease. Our focus is not as much as on, developing health or improving the quality of life by using health as a resource. We have to reach higher levels of well-being. So health and well-being is really not given that much attention in today's medical practice. It's very curative oriented. And there is also this irony. If you look at countries like the United States, it's well understood that amongst the diseases that cause mortality and morbidity of the human population, non-communicable diseases, or NCDs, figure at the top. At least 70% of the healthcare burden can be attributed to non-communicable diseases like heart disease, cancer, respiratory illnesses, and diabetes. These 4 or 5 disease categories account for nearly 70% of the global healthcare burden. And this shows that, the solution is, for the future, also, making people more responsible for their own health. And we cannot solve all these problems with only medicine. And it's very, very interesting and shocking to also realize that in the United States, the number 1 killer is cardiovascular disease. The number 2 is cancer. And the number 3 is medical treatment. Now, this is the most shocking revelation. This is a very honest confession. This preoccupation on curative medicine has led to unnecessary medical interventions and prescription of medicines that is actually becoming counterproductive. So it is a matter of serious concern that the third leading cause of mortality in many parts of the world is actually medical intervention. So this is the context in which Ayurveda assumes significance. With Ayurveda, we are not talking about a competition with Western medicine. Western medicine has progressed in many areas, and we have many new possibilities of medical interventions, but it is sometimes lopsided and the focus is too much on curative medicine. And here Ayurveda brings us a fresh perspective, looking at life in totality, looking at other goals of positive well-being, positive concepts about health. And that is what I would like to focus here today. So Ayurveda has been codified through the centuries. I mean, it is a very scholarly tradition. Most of the time we look down upon Ayurveda as, folk medicine, or Natu Vaidyam, as sometimes we refer to, indicating it's not so organized, it's just folklore knowledge. But it's very important to know that Ayurveda has been codified in a very structured and rigorous manner. Ayurvedic textbooks are masterpieces of technical writing, and some of the most old ancient textbooks like the Charaka Samhita, Sushruta Samhita, Kashyapa Samhita, Bhela Samhita. These are all, highly developed and systematized accounts of medical knowledge that even today look very modern and appealing. And all of these have also gone through a long process of editing. In fact, if you look at the Charaka Samhita, I don't think there's any textbook in the world that survived, 3,000, more than 3,000 years, and it is still being used. Because you have a few editions of textbooks today, most of them would date to maybe a few hundred years. But here we have a textbook that is thousands of years, has been updated, edited, and evolved. That's also very important. When we look at Ayurvedic texts, it's not that they were just written for once and then, no changes happened. The Charaka Samhita was originally, a student's handbook. That is also very interesting. The Charaka Samhita was a student's handbook, which was later developed, enlarged, and revised and updated, and this process itself took several centuries. And that is how even the Sushruta Samhita also has a similar history of long-term editing. And if you look at the Ayurvedic text writing, even in the whole Indian tradition, it was Ayurveda that contributed to creating the rules for technical writing. Today we know that when we write a research paper, we need to follow certain formatting. For technical writing, there are some codes. And this is seen in Ayurveda. These codes are called as the Tantra Yuktis, the rules for technical writing. And it's quite fascinating to see that these are actually described mainly in the Ayurvedic text, which means that the tradition of Ayurveda actually contributed to the development of technical writing in India. Apart from Ayurveda, we see a reference to these Tantra Yuktis in the Artha Shastra of Kautilya and also in the Vishnu Dharmottara Purana. But otherwise, the most elaborate descriptions are seen in the classical Ayurvedic textbooks. And the formats, there are different formats for writing Ayurvedic texts. So we have Samhitas, which are compendiums. We have Nigandus, which are medical lexicons, materia medica. We have sutras or aphorisms, which are very, very brief and concise summaries of fundamental concepts in Ayurveda. We have glossaries, vyakhyas or elaborations, commentaries, formularies, monographs. So the Ayurvedic literature. So this is a very fascinating thing. And it's quite painful to know that, the entire scientific literature in India and even the medical literature, less than 10% of it has actually been explored, has actually been studied or transcribed or translated. 90% of these manuscripts are, languishing in the manuscript repositories. They have not been studied for want of scholarship. They are written in various scripts, and only we can say that the major textbooks have been studied and transcribed, but we still do not have an idea of the breadth and depth of knowledge that has actually been preserved through the medical tradition of Ayurveda. It can easily be one of the richest medical literature existing in the world, and it is a pity that we have not explored it or brought it to the limelight in a complete and comprehensive manner. So here I would like to demonstrate through this picture of how extensive this literature is. This is just an indicative. So here you can see the whole map of India, and here is the cross-section of a tree. This indicates the time, the annular rings in the tree indicating the major chronological time periods, and here the geographical breadth and length of the country. And what I have put here is only very indicative. If you were to place all the Ayurvedic textbooks based on the geographical location and the time period in which they were written, we will not be able to see the map of India. Every region in our country has contributed to the development of the medical knowledge. So you can trace them to every nook and corner of India. In every nook and corner, in every small village, somebody was writing a medical manuscript at all time periods. So every time period, chronological landmark, we can see a new textbook was written. Knowledge was updated. And this was a pan-Indian contribution, the entire country. And with the textbooks like Charaka Samhita talk about visitors from outside also. So the then globe, the then world participated and contributed to the development and codification of Ayurvedic knowledge. So this is the chronogeographical spread. So this is the wealth of the medical tradition that we have inherited. And I thought to begin our discussion, this is kind of the background situation. Now, if you look at time lapse, this is something which has not been brought into the highlight. Today, when we talk about the development or evolution of medicine, we trace it to Hippocrates and the Western, medical tradition. But parallelly, many other medical systems existed at that time, and they had exchange of knowledge, and we have not really brought to focus the unique contributions. Even Chinese system is quite old, and Indian and Chinese medical systems, Ayurveda also had a lot of exchanges. So if you were to look at a timeline of and it's very difficult to fix and identify these timelines because, as I mentioned in the beginning, we are unable to trace the roots of the origin of Ayurveda. But you can see there are many, many important landmarks, breakthroughs in medical theory and practice that we can attribute to Ayurveda from the BCE. I mean, before the Common Era, many thousands of years before the Common Era. And one of the first, even in the Vedic period, what we see is the concept of zoopharmacognosy. How by observing nature, by observing animal life, we can get the first clues about the medicinal properties of plants and substances. In the Atharva Veda, there is a saying, Varaho Veda Bheshajam, Nakulo Veda Bheshajam. The mongoose knows, the boar knows, the eagle knows, let these medicines come to me for my help. Today, this way of learning is called as zoopharmacognosy. Zoopharmacognosy means animals have that instinctual knowledge of what is medicinal and what can be used as medicine. It's very interesting to see that I think in the university in New Mexico, the researchers found a strange sight. They found that sparrows were picking up cigarette butts that were thrown by people who were smoking, and they were carrying it. And the researchers were surprised. They were wondering why the sparrow should pick up tobacco, from the cigarette butts. And when they followed the sparrows, they found these sparrows were going and opening the cigarette butts and lining their, nests with the tobacco inside the cigarette butts. And this was very surprising. Later, they found that the eggs were being attacked by a certain parasite, and this this tobacco had that particular chemical which could repel these parasites. Now, for a human being to discover this correlation, that, in the tobacco, there is a chemical that can prevent this parasite, without any laboratory, without any scientific investigation, the sparrows could know it just by instinct. This is the power of zoopharmacognosy. What for a human scientist would have perhaps taken a century of efforts, of so many sophisticated experiments trying to, it doesn't even look theoretically possible that we can ever find, first you must get the idea that tobacco has something which can work against a parasite. Even to get to that idea is, very, very challenging. So this is what, even in human discovery of science, we call this a serendipity. Like Alexander Fleming accidentally discovered, that the fungus had an antibiotic property. So this is Ayurveda acknowledges that this is one of the sources through which this knowledge emerged, pharmacognosy. We can see that even in the pre-Vedic origins of Ayurveda. And it's very fascinating to see that in Ayurvedic tradition, there has been a discussion on when you give a medicine, is the medicine really working, or is it a chance effect? This is what modern statisticians are today asking. Did the medicine really work, or was it just chance effect? So in statistics, we use the p-value to show the probability, whether the outcome was due to chance or due to the effect of the medicine. And you can see that this Ayurveda scientists were debating this, in the BCE, several thousands before the Common Era. In Charaka Samhita tells that if you treat a patient and he gets better, and if you cannot prove that it was due to your medicine, then it is accidental success. So you can imagine there is also this distinction. Ayurveda was perhaps one of the earliest medical systems to distinguish between psychological effect and effect of a drug. Ayurveda acknowledged that just by influencing the mind of a person, you can bring about a medical effect. And this needs to be distinguished. A drug will work because of the drug's pharmacological effect, but even a sham or a make-believe medicine or a mantra, or you can also influence a patient's mind and bring about the same effect, and the medicine may not have any role to play. This is also a big debate and question in medical research today, and it's quite fascinating to see that old textbooks like Charaka Samhita talk about this. And Ayurveda is based on cause and effect relationships, which is called as Karya Karana Bandha, that for every effect there is a cause. And by identifying the cause, we can change the effect. This is the theoretical basis of Ayurveda. So it is not superstition, or, it's based on understanding cause and effect chain and relationships. And Ayurveda also talks about the possibility of developing newer and newer medicines. Jagatyeva manaushadham. There is nothing in this world which is having no medicinal property. If you have the eye to look at it, you can discover medicine from almost anything. So the Sushruta Samhita says, Nadishu Chaileshu Sarassu Chapi, Vanyeshu Aranyeshu Tathashrameshu, Sarvatra Sarva Parimargidavya, Sarvatra Bhumiri Vasuni Dhate. This earth is abounding in resources that can be used as medicine. So Sushruta says, Nadishu, search in the rivers, even in water sources. Today we are talking about oceans. Nadishu Shaileshu, look in the rivers, look in the mountains, look in the seas, look in the forests, look everywhere, because this earth abounds in resources and it's full of medicines. So Ayurveda says that there's no end to developing new medicines. Ayurveda also talks about new diseases. This is very fascinating, because many times when we study Ayurveda, they tell that we have listed only the diseases that are prevalent at this time, but there could be new diseases in the future. And Ayurveda tells us how you can study new diseases and how you can develop new treatments for new diseases. So you can see this is scientifically a very progressive approach. And Ayurveda talks about developing new protocols. Today, when we got affected by COVID, we talked about, repurposing. And Ayurveda was one of the first medical systems to talk about repurposing old medicines for new diseases, how you can modify them, how you can adapt them to deal with new conditions. And new formulations. The physician was supposed to be creative and develop new treatments, new protocols, because according to Ayurveda, every person deserves a new treatment protocol, because Ayurveda is individualized. So there is no end to developing new medicines. If a new person is born, everything is unique for that individual. So there is no limit to creativity. And Ayurvedic textbooks have also updated the disease classification, pharmacopoeia. So we see a very dynamic tradition. There are also developments of new theories, and this I've just tried to capture very briefly some of the, just to highlight, that we had a very robust, scientific, progressive, questioning medical tradition, and which continuously evolved over a time period, even while it kept some of the most fundamental concepts very stable. Ayurveda says that, a good knowledge system has a 3-tier structure: Tattva, Shastra, and Vyavahara. So Tattva means principles, the truth in nature, which nobody can change. So we are only discovering what is there in nature. We are not creating anything new. So at the level of Tattva, as long as nature does not change, Tattva will not change. But our understanding of the Tattva may change. That is the Shastra. So this is a very interesting concept, which you can see in the Ayurvedic tradition. The laws of nature, which are immutable, Ayurveda considers to be unchangeable, because otherwise science is not possible. If nature keeps changing its laws, no prediction would be possible. So Ayurveda accepts that Tattva, or thatness, but our understanding, theorizing these principles in nature may change over time to a certain extent. We can better understand. So that is the Shastra. And the applications are called as Vyavahara. So Tattva, Shastra, and Vyavahara. Behind every application and intervention, there is a Shastra or a theory. Behind every theory, there is a principle in nature, which we can actually, verify and experience. So this is the 3-tier structure of Ayurveda, which gave it stability and flexibility at the same time. We believe that the fundamental framework can remain unchanging, but on the other side, you can keep rebuilding on that foundation. So we had a very stable and flexible knowledge system in Ayurveda. And I think compared to many other knowledge systems, this idea of structured technical writing and structured organization of knowledge is very well articulated in the tradition of Ayurveda. Now, I have put many concepts in the slides today, which is also for extra reading. We won't be able to cover all the topics I have in my slides in the short period, but I included more topics so that you can read them after our discussion for your own better understanding and deeper understanding. And I've also given a link where you can look up additional reading material so that, if you're more interested to explore, you can read more. And I want to also say that when you study reading materials of Ayurveda, we must take everything with a pinch of salt, because, it's like the story of the elephant and the 5 blind men. Don't take any view as complete and final, because Ayurveda is quite complex. It is multifaceted, and different people have looked at it from their own perspective. So you may be able to see a scientist, when he looks at Ayurveda, he sees it in a particular way. A historian may have seen it in a particular way. A Western historian may look at Ayurveda from the viewpoint of Greek medicine. An Indian historian may look at it in a different way. So that warning I would like to give: when you are looking at these reading materials, please look at the background of the author. But you can stitch all these views together and get a more complete understanding. And that is what I want to also lay a foundation here, that Ayurveda is quite vast, and it has not been completely understood. Because, in Ayurveda, we have spirituality also, we have science also. Ayurveda is a good blend of science and spirituality, the inner world and the outer world. A scientist may find that to be religion and may consider that as, more primitive, but that is not correct, because what we have in Ayurveda is not religion, but it is spirituality. It is an understanding of our own consciousness, which today should be classified under consciousness studies and not just as, religious rituals. So I will highlight some of those points. Now, if you look at what Ayurveda can contribute, what is Ayurveda in a nutshell? I would say that Ayurveda is first and foremost nature-centered medicine. I want to highlight this because many people talk about Ayurveda as person-centered medicine. This is a very anthropocentric worldview. Ayurveda does not conform to that. Ayurveda clearly tells us that unless nature is balanced, we cannot be balanced. And this is something which is so relevant today. And we know about the climate summit and all the challenges. People are supposedly saying that we have taken big measures, but when it comes to implementation, one of the biggest tragedies of modern civilization is that we don't have this nature-centered view. I mean, we are we are completely destroying nature. And even the COVID-19 pandemic is an example of what can happen if we disturb the balance in nature. So according to Ayurveda, nature being healthy is a very essential prerequisite, for us also to be healthy, because it is our interaction with nature that determines, the outcomes of our physiology. If we are living in an environment where life cannot be supported, I mean, that is unfortunately what we are creating today. And Ayurveda says that Purushoyam Loka Sameta, the human being is an epitome of the universe. Whatever is there in the universe is there in us also, the macrocosm and the microcosm. The microcosm is a miniature macrocosm. And this is what we study in Ayurveda, that Srishti, we are first made, in modern medicine, when we study anatomy. It's a very anthropocentric approach to studying medicine. Everything is human-centered. You see a dead body and start your study of medicine. One serial called The Mentalist, I found, it's an American serial, but it's very interesting. There was a dialogue. The mentalist is identifying a quack physician, and he says this doctor is a quack because she has compassion. And this is really interesting, because what he points out is that in today's medical education in the US, it's impossible for a doctor to develop compassion, because in the very first year, you are thrown before a dead body and a pile of books, and there you become insensitive. It's a very bad idea to start the study of medicine by dissecting a dead body where there is no life anymore. You become insensitized. You don't learn to respect life. What Ayurveda says is that we study about human body by first studying the universe, the macrocosm, Srishti Chariram. The universe is giving birth to the microcosm. This is the idea the first idea that a medical student should have. And so in Ayurveda, we do Srishti Chariram and Garbha Chariram. This is first what the medical student has to learn, how the universe gives birth to the microcosm. So we start by seeing a new life. Childbirth is what Ayurveda says a medical student should start by understanding, because then you begin to respect life. Shariram, the Ayurvedic concept of studying about the human body, begins with birth and ends in death. So first you appreciate what is life. You behold the miracle of the creation of life, and you see nature and the person. The person is connected to nature, and that nothing, the food that we eat, the air that we breathe, everything is, provided by nature. And this, secondly, we become person-centered. And this is very interesting concept here, that, what is unique about life is that if you look at what we are made up of, we are all made of the same ingredients: carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, same elements, same amino acids, same nucleic acids. There's no difference. If we were to break us down into the components, we are all same. But yet we know we are also different. So what makes us different? It's just the configuration. So nature provides the same raw materials, it's equal. But how these raw materials are configured, even the whole of life, it's the same four nucleic acids which creates the DNA from the first living form to the humans. There's no difference. But just because of the way they are configured, we become unique. So when you look at person-centered medicine, Ayurveda tells us how we are so unique in spite of being made out of the same ingredients. And knowing our uniqueness gives us the right perspective in life. We have to understand that there is nobody like us in this universe. And by understanding our uniqueness, we know what is our signature, our life's signature. And expressing our uniqueness is the way for fulfillment, for not only of our individual life, but that is the best way we can contribute to the whole of society itself. This is what in the Bhagavad Gita is also referred to as Swadharma. Swadharme nidhanam shreya paradharmo bhayavaha. So Ayurveda says that because we are all unique, and that's what Ayurveda explains to as our prakriti, as each person has its signature configuration. which gives us a certain uniqueness. And once we discover our uniqueness, our life becomes so meaningful, so focused, and our whole goal is to express our uniqueness, leave that signature of our life. That is the goal of our life. That is the contribution that we have to make. And everybody has a unique signature and a unique role or function to play. So nature-centered medicine, then person-centered medicine. And then Ayurveda is all about integration of lifestyle, diet, and medicine. Ayurveda points out that health is an individual's responsibility. There is a very interesting statement in some of our old textbooks, like Parishramo Mitaharo Bhugada Vashvina Viva. Parishrama is, physical activity. Mitahara is controlled diet. These are like the Ashwini Devas on earth. And if you follow these two principles, there is no need to see a physician. There was a time when physicians were paid only if society was healthy. If anybody became sick, their pay would be cut. That was the responsibility of the old physician. Today, we have created a medical culture which makes profits out of a person's illness and sickness. I'm just telling some of the fundamental concepts in Ayurveda may make us think differently, because when we study Ayurveda, we are asked to pray. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Let everybody be happy. Let everyone be healthy. Let nobody be sick. But today we have a healthcare industry which is actually preying upon the sickness of people. When you say cancer, I have attended conferences and meetings of pharma establishments where they talk about cancer as the cutting edge opportunity, for medical business. So the whole concept has changed. And Ayurveda is very much focused on lifestyle, diet, and medicine. And I want to highlight some of the new researches that are emerged today. I don't know how many of you are aware that, some of our major killers like cardiovascular disease, blood pressure, hypertension, for which we are taking medicines. They are now, modern research is telling us that the best way to treat them and cure them is through diet and lifestyle. There is a trial in the Europe which is called as direct trial, diabetes remission trial, clinical trial for remission of diabetes. And their finding is that if you get, hyperglycemia, and if you start medications immediately, then you're going to be a diabetic for life. On the other hand, if you participate in a weight management program and make some changes in your lifestyle, within 1 year, you can reverse diabetes and you can be on remission. You will not need any medications. This is one of the latest findings. It was published in the Lancet journal. So if you look for direct trial, Google direct trial, and you can get all this information. And I don't know how many of you have, because there is no cure for diabetes. Once you get the disease, you are only trying to manage it. And blood sugar, controlling blood sugar alone is not enough. Diabetes progresses. It causes microvascular complications. It damages your eyes. It damages your kidneys. It damages your heart. It damages your nerves. You get diabetic nephropathy. You get diabetic foot ulcer. You get carbuncles. So it is a disease that greatly compromises the quality of your life. And in the early stages, if you are able to bring about a change in your diet and lifestyle, and this is such a sad thing that a country like India is now labeled as the diabetes capital of the world. And this is because, in ancient times, our diet was more suitable for our lifestyle. But today we have given up our traditional lifestyle and started using Western foods, which are not wrong in itself, but not suited for our climate and our place. In the West, it's a very cold country. And so they need to eat more fat, and they have, they to stimulate their metabolism. And so even alcohol is needed to survive in some cold weathers. But in India, especially if you look at the South, this is absolutely unnecessary. Ayurveda says that not to drink alcohol in such weather, it is harmful. and also eating very high, heavy fried, fats and foods. This is what is causing the rise in incidence of cardiovascular disease as well as diabetes. Now, when it comes to hypertension, how many of us are aware that the best treatment of hypertension is diet and exercise? In fact, the best medicine recommended by American Heart Association for high blood pressure is called as DASH. Dietary approaches to stop hypertension. It's called as DASH. There was a cardiologist in the US. His name is Dean Ornish. He was the first person to show that it is only through diet and lifestyle that you can reverse the blockages in the coronary disease artery, coronary artery. The only problem is that you will have to bring about these changes in your diet and lifestyle. Otherwise, you take medicine. And even with medicine, there is a recurrence of heart disease. Even with bypass surgery, people are still dying because that is not a solution for this problem. So many such diseases, and Ayurveda clearly tells that, when you are in the pre-hypertension or early hypertension, in as quickly as 3 days to 3 weeks, you can bring about drastic changes in your blood pressure without having to take any medicines. And if you can sustain it, then you will not need any antihypertensive medicines. So diet, lifestyle, and medicine, how this becomes a medical intervention is a very important aspect of Ayurveda. And then we have mind-body medicine. This is also very interesting. I don't know how many of us are aware that, there is a deep link between our body and mind. And Ayurveda is all about exploring and taking this to full advantage. There is a crosstalk between our mind and body. And Ayurveda tells this is like the ghee and the iron pot. If you pour hot ghee into the iron pot gets heated. If you heat an iron pot which contains ghee, the ghee will also get heated. This is how the body and the mind is. If one gets heated, the other is affected. And today in modern science, we are talking about this crosstalk, this axis of the body and mind as a PNEI axis, psycho, neuro, endocrino, immunology. And it's quite interesting to see that this is a molecular understanding of the old Ayurvedic model of the human body, manas, vata, pitta, and kapha. That is how we looked at the body and the mind. The mind is the manas, vata is the neurological regulation, pitta is endocrinological regulation, and kapha is the immune regulation. These are the three regulatory systems of the body, and there is a continuous crosstalk. So if you have a stress in the mind, your neurological regulation is affected, your hormonal regulation is affected, it can affect your immune system. Similarly, if something happens in the body, this is called as the neurochemicals of happiness. There is a neurochemical called Anandamide. This is an endocannabinoid, means our body itself is a drugstore. You can get a high. You don't need to take any cannabis from outside. If you can know your body itself is a pharmacy, can produce all these chemicals that can keep you in a high without creating any harm. This Anandamide, it's a very interesting name. Ananda is one of the few chemicals in the world, biochemicals which we see in the body, which is given a Sanskrit name. And it's very apt. Ananda means bliss. So when your body produces more of Anandamide, you feel very blissful. So it's called as a bliss molecule. So many years ago, scientists found that the body has receptors for endocannabinoids, for cannabinoid. So they were wondering why the body has a receptor. So there has to be some chemical which will fit into that receptor. And nobody was able to find it. And one Israeli scientist, amongst many others, was searching for this. And he happened to come to India, to Aurobindo Ashram. And while he was at the Aurobindo Ashram, he had a vision that he would be the one who will discover this molecule that fits into this receptor. And in that moment of inspiration at the Aurobindo Ashram, he already gave a name. He had a feeling that what he is going to discover will be an amide chemically, and that he should call it as Anandamide. 4 years later, it so happened that he became the first scientist to discover this molecule. And He kept his resolve. He called this as Anandamide. And do you know how you can produce more Anandamide in our body? Just run. If you can really run very hard every day, then you will have adequate supply of Anandamide to keep you blissful throughout the day. You don't need to do any meditation. So our body has all the ingredients that is necessary to keep us blissful and stress-free. One is the Anandamide endocannabinoid. Another one is endorphin, which makes us, so if you are engaging in active sports or martial arts, which is why in our tradition people were trained in martial arts in the young age, so that it's a mood elevator. Endorphin elevates your mood. It enables you to, so living a particular lifestyle and understanding body mind complexity, this is all about the Ayurvedic way of living, empowering yourself. Then you have, if you practice yoga, what happens? Your body produces a chemical called GABA. GABA is an anti-anxiety molecule. And the more and more you produce, the less you will be affected by anxiety. There is another molecule called serotonin, which is called as the happiness molecule, which is produced a lot from your stomach. And if you maintain certain food habits, and also if you can keep some structure in your life, work according to a timetable. This is why some disciplining in lifestyle is very important. These chemicals are stimulated and you feel, happy. And then there is another molecule called oxytocin, which is called the bonding molecule, which is supposed to be, influenced by the heart. And this is the reason why the love symbol is always associated with the heart. Because if you hug another person, you get a lot of oxytocin is produced, especially mother-child cuddling produces a lot of oxytocin. And oxytocin makes you feel more bonded. And this is why socializing, interacting with people, touching each other, in an affectionate way, all this is very important for this chemical to be released. And then we have also dopamine, which is called the reward molecule. So it is very important that when you achieve something, you self-congratulate yourself. And this is why sometimes we have to recognize and give awards, and we shouldn't overdo it, but to a certain extent, it's good to give a word of appreciation to somebody around you. I mean, you might be stimulating their dopamine, making them feel better, and this will also improve our interactions with them. So if we know how to activate these biochemicals in our own body, which is what, when you compare Ayurveda with modern knowledge, this is what the whole Ayurvedic way of good living is all about. Completely changing your chemistry. And in fact, that is why in Ayurveda, the essence of your digested food is called rasa. Rasa means actually enjoyment. Rasa means the fluid of joy. So if you correctly digest and absorb the food that you eat, then you have all the ingredients to bring out the delight of life. And Ayurveda says, what is health? Health is to be happy without any reason. Being happy for no reason. When you are like that, then you can say you are healthy. Nothing less, nothing more. It doesn't matter whether your blood test results are okay. It doesn't matter whether your scans have come out well. If you are not happy, just for no reason, because we all need a reason to be happy. In fact, if somebody is happy, we always ask, what is the reason? Why are you happy? But we must reach a stage where we are happy because we exist. When we take delight in that very existence, that we are here, and that is what Ayurveda calls as health, sukha samnikam arogya. So this is how Ayurveda leads us to that higher state of health and wellness, which also brings a lot of changes in the way we interact with our environment, the way we interact with nature. And it is wrong to say that Ayurveda, many people think, is vegetarianism. It is not. And Ayurveda means tough diet. No, Ayurveda tells that you can use anything under the sun, herbal, animal, chemical, anything can be used, but they should be used in a balanced way. So even non-vegetarian diet is accepted, but Ayurveda tells, don't eat for your tongue, don't eat for pleasure. eat, if it is nutritionally necessary, you can take that nature, because it's a food chain, food web. But humans are the only people who eat meat just for the pleasure of it. No animal eats unless it really requires it. I'm always, intrigued by the fact that for animal studies in science, we have so many restrictions. And if you look at the total number of animals that are killed, for scientific research, comes in thousands, maybe a few lakhs, fine. But if you look at the animals that are slaughtered for food, it is in billions every day. And there is no ethics there. And many of these animals are actually sacrificed in such cruel way. So Ayurveda also talks here about some balance, how your nutrition can be balanced. When there is a medical need, when there is a nutritional need, and at a certain age, when your protein requirement is high, Ayurveda recommends, meat. And the old concept was that you should only eat meat that you have hunted, but that's not practical today. According to Ayurveda, killing an animal that you're domesticating, you are, taking care of it and then killing it. This is considered to be cheating. So what Ayurveda says is go to the forest, be hunted and hunt. That is the fair way of getting your meat. And that was the way hunting was done in ancient times. I'm just talking about some ethical issues, because Ayurveda is also about ethical medicine. Because ethical medicine is that which gives you a deeper sense of calm and centeredness, which is very necessary for realizing higher states of mental well-being. So, and then Ayurveda is talking about preventive and predictive medicine. And this is extremely important. As we know, in the Yoga Sutras, it is mentioned, Heyam Dukkham Anagadam. We have to remove the sorrow that has not yet come. So Ayurveda talks about how we can identify our physical and mental constitution and understand our susceptibilities and our strengths, and then choose a way of living that will, prevent so many illnesses even before they can manifest. And finally, Ayurveda is about healthy aging. So I hope this overview gives an idea about what Ayurveda is in a nutshell, what Ayurveda is dealing with in a nutshell. All these elements make up Ayurveda. Healthy aging is extremely important because, we are all destined for that ultimate fate in our lives. I mean, we just pass away. And of course, we think we are immortal. That is the whole paradox of life. And Ayurveda tells that we must plan for an old age. And this is very, very important because Ayurveda tells it's possible to age successfully. Today, people are frightened of aging because we think that aging means crippled, dependent. But in Ayurveda and in our tradition, the old age was the time for Vanaprastha and Sannyasa, where people were contemplative. They were self-dependent. Today, we have created a situation where old people need to be put into old age shelter homes. Whereas in our tradition, old people were the shelter for the world. They were considered as big trees that gave shade because they were more mature. When we are born, we have tamas. I hope you are aware of rajas, tamas, and sattva, the three gunas of the mind, because you have into this course for some days now. I'm sure you are aware of that, because I don't want to spend time looking into these basic concepts. So we all know when we are born, we cry and we sleep, which means we are tamasic. And as we reach our adolescence, we become rebels. So the rajas comes. This is natural. The third stage, we are supposed to become mature, but we carry with our tamas and rajas. That is what distinguishes human life from other animals. A full-grown cow is full-grown. Physically grown is mentally also grown. But humans, physical growth does not always correspond to mental evolution. So our Shastras tell us that the movement from tamas to rajas happens automatically. When you reach adolescence, you have that rush of blood and the rajasic expressions. But after that, whether you evolve into a sattvic state, it depends on us. We can still remain a child our whole life under the grip of our tamas and rajas, or we can evolve into a sattvic state. And if you develop your sattvic state before you reach old age, then your body will not trouble you. So in old age, we must get a sattvic stage. Ayurveda clearly tells it is not necessary that you should have cognitive decline, except in the moments before your death. You can be, this is called as successful aging. Today, modern gerontologists are also talking about successful aging. It is possible at the age of 75 not to have any major physical illnesses, no cardiovascular problems, no diabetes. You can still have fairly good eyesight. It's all possible. According to Ayurveda, eyesight declines by 60. But you can still keep it under check. You may need some assistance, but it doesn't have to be really very bad. Cognitive decline can be prevented. Today, we are in a very big dilemma. To save your heart, we are killing our brain. Or when we try to save our brain, we kill our heart, because this cholesterol business. Now they have come with the concept that dietary cholesterol is not harmful. It's only certain types of fats, especially, deep fried, repeatedly fried fats. Certain types of fats are only harmful. Otherwise, fat is so essential for our system. And brain, is just 2% of the body's weight, but 25% of our brain is cholesterol. And most of the problems that we are facing in old age today is because we are not taking care of our brain. The fat is damaged, demyelinating diseases, Alzheimer's disease, dementia, Parkinson's. These are all diseases affecting people in the old age. And FDA gives a warning that if you take statins which reduce cholesterol, you may have brain problems. So in order to save the heart, we kill our brain. Or without knowing, eating too much of heart, we damage our heart. And Ayurveda tells us there is a way to preserve both your brain and heart, and that is by proper use. When we are using milk, there are good milk and bad milk. Today, the commercial milk that we are taking is very harmful. The cow, how we graze the cow. There are certain specific types of cow in our tradition called the Ghee cow, which feeds on the grass and which is exposed to sunlight. These cows produce more rich nutrients. I don't know how many of you have heard of vitamin K2. I call this as vitamin Krishna, because Krishna was the first person in our tradition to show the importance of not only grazing the cows, exposing them to sunlight, making them eat grass, and then stealing the butter and ghee and milk and, nourishing oneself. Taking care of that whole process. Now, what is vitamin? Vitamin K, we all know, is important in blood clotting, but there's another vitamin called vitamin K2. This vitamin is essential. Vitamin D helps the body to absorb calcium. But that calcium, if it gets deposited in wrong places, it can cause cardiovascular disease, so many problems. So the calcium that is absorbed need to be deposited in the right locations, like in the bones. For that, we need K2, vitamin K2. And only grass-fed cows, which are exposed to enough sunlight, produces vitamin K2. There are compounds, in ghee, for example, traditionally made ghee is very different from commercial ghee. This ghee has medium chain fatty acids. They don't increase weight. Medium chain fatty acids are used for burning and releasing energy, so they don't get stored. But if it is long chain fatty acids, they will get stored. So many such interesting concepts about nutrition also Ayurveda provides. And Ayurveda tells us how you can reach old age, preserving your mental health, being sattvic, and becoming a shelter to the world. Death, according to Ayurveda, is like, if birth is like sunrise, death is like sunsets. So when you have a timely death, it is as meditative. It's only in our tradition that we celebrated death. But today, it is wrong we are doing. A person who dies of accident, we shouldn't be celebrating that person's death. It is a tragedy. A person who lives a complete life and passes away, it's like the sunset. So we celebrate such a passing away. In Tamil Nadu, we have seen people dancing when the corpse is taken to the funeral. This is the concept that even death needs to be celebrated because it is a completion. And it's as beautiful and contemplative as birth. So Ayurveda is all about preventing untimely death and accepting timely death. And what I remember when I was very young, some of our elders in the family, they used to tell when we used to go home for vacations, they used to call and tell, next time you come, I will not be here. It's as if they knew that they are going to pass away. And, they would come and, they would feel happy that they have talked to us and given us some small gifts. And next time when you go, they are not there. It happened. I have seen this happening to many people. Not nowadays. Nowadays, you are shocked by some untimely death. I remember a poet once said, "Oh, death, where are thy stings that the seers have seen in thee?" Because death for us is a frightening experience. So this poet is talking about death as a gentle mother, as a mother who comes and puts a child to sleep. And the poet is asking, "Oh, death, where are thy stings that the seers have seen in thee?" Here I see death coming like a mother, gently coming and caressing a child and putting him to sleep like a lullaby. So death becomes, like falling asleep naturally and gently. Death is not something that we need to be afraid of, which we have to embrace with understanding. Dealing with death is a very, very important aspect of the Ayurvedic view of life. And what Ayurveda also tells us is that it is not death. We have to discard our body consciously. Yogenande tanutyajam. The Kalidasa is talking about the Raghuvamsha kings who never died, but they discarded their body when the time came. They would sit in a yoga mudra and then discard their bodies when the time comes. So death will wait. And this is a very, very important aspect of dealing with old age. Today we know, because modern medical technology has prolonged life, but not quality of health. So prolonging lifespan is one thing, prolonging health span is another thing. What we need is prolongation of health span, not just lifespan. So today people are worried about the burden of old people who are crippled, mentally crippled, because they have dementia, they have Alzheimer's. How do we take care of such a society? The best care that we can give them is the ability for self-care. And that is what Ayurveda talks about as healthy aging. So these are very quickly, this is the nutshell of what I wanted to discuss today. I thought that the last 20 minutes we will keep for some discussion. So another 8 minutes I will take to, sum up some of these concepts and a few more. There are much more material in the slides, which I would, encourage you to read and develop further understanding. Now, nature-centered medicine in Ayurveda, we say that for a particular people, what is growing there in that region is most suited. This kind of seasonality and regionality is something we are completely lost today because of globalization. This was so protective that people eating fruits and vegetables that grow in particular regions. In Ladakh, for example, Ladakh is a very high altitude region. There, people use the milk of yak, and that is very high in cholesterol, but they also use soya, which is growing there naturally, which has a compound called lecithin, which can thin the cholesterol. There, the water is hard, so people can easily develop kidney stones. But they have in that region a lot of amaranthus which grows, which breaks these stones. So just see how nature provides. That in that region, because of high altitude, they have oxygen problem, shortage. So the plant ephedra grows there, and these people make tea out of ephedra and not our tea leaves. And this ephedra is a bronchodilator. So when you go to those high altitude regions, drinking that tea is the best to survive there. In South India, especially in places like Andhra, I've always wondered why people eat so much of chilies. It's such a hot place. It is not, counter logic. But the reason is wherever you can see, wherever there is too much of heat, especially dry heat where humidity is less, people tend to use these kind of pungent substances because they promote sweating. If you don't promote sweating, the heat trapped inside can cause a heat wave and can cause severe health problems. But when you take those strong andhra pickles in the summer, your body begins to sweat, you lose the heat, and this helps in balancing. I don't know how many of you are aware that sambar, the study recently done on the sambar, the South Indian dish, revealed that it offers protection against colon cancer. In the Europe, colon cancer incidence is very high. In India, if you look at South India and North India colon cancer is having a higher incidence. Probably the use of these kind of regional dishes are very, very important. Similarly, turmeric, is a very good anti-inflammatory, anti-cancer medicine. But if you don't add pepper, the curcumin will not get absorbed. So that is why in olden times we used to, whenever we used turmeric, we also used pepper. But today we have replaced it with chilies. So now the turmeric only colors your intestine. It goes in and goes out without giving that benefit. So whenever you use turmeric, we must use. So this kind of regional, understanding and knowledge is completely lost. Similarly, in summer, we always drink very diluted buttermilk with little salt. So it was because we knew that just plain water is not enough, because salt is lost by sweating. And that is why salted buttermilk, and digestion is weak. So if you drink a lot of water, your digestion will get affected. So thin buttermilk with little spices to stimulate the digestion, replace the lost salt and cool your digestive system. This was a perfect summer drink. So these kind of nature-centered approaches which look at the local climate, I think it's very important that we revive this. In Ayurveda, we say that food should be nutritious, food should be assimilable, and it should also be tasty. Now, this is an impossible equation to fulfill, because we can find when we make food nutritious, it loses its taste. And sometimes nutritious food cannot be assimilated or digested. So this is where Ayurvedic art of cooking, I think it is one of the most scientific approaches to cooking, because Ayurveda says food should be tasty. So you need a recipe, a very beautiful way of making food. And in India, this was an art. Even kings were considered qualified only if they knew how to cook. I don't know how many of us are aware that one of the most authentic textbooks on cookery was by King Nala, Pakadarpana of King Nala. And when he was moving incognito, it was his cookery skills that enabled him to find refuge in another king's court. So cooking was taken very seriously, and food was considered to be the biggest gift. So we have this tradition of Anandamide. And food should not be sold. Food should be given out of love, because food has that ability to carry that emotional vibrations of the person who is serving it. And Ayurveda says never buy food. Today, our toilets are in our bedrooms and our dining is outside. In olden days, it was the opposite. We used to eat inside and excrete outside. Now, this is the modern way of life. The whole thing has reversed. So food is something which should, it was like Annapurneshwari. The most sacred part of our house was the kitchen and where food was cooked. And why the woman was made, the males can be cooks, but the woman has to serve, because food should be served with motherly love, because in food makes us reborn. So these are very interesting philosophical and conceptual perspectives that Ayurveda offers. And also this whole art and science of cooking, of making food tasty, delicious, nutritious, and assimilable. This is the principle of. Now here is the study of the human body. As I was telling, in Ayurveda, we start from creation, the macrocosm, the microcosm, and then the physiology understanding until we go to death. So that whole evolution of the human life, understanding its purpose, this is how Ayurveda studies. Now, another point I want to talk about here is, with this I think I will conclude. When we were all students at that time, the WHO slogan was health for all by 2000 AD. When I was studying Ayurveda, this is what we all heard. So we were wondering how it is going to happen. 2000 AD, everybody is going to get health. Now WHO is planning to package health into a capsule or bottle and distribute. Is it so simple? I mean, that slogan itself sounded so simplistic. And around 2000, what we saw was AIDS, the great pandemic of AIDS. And the whole world was in shock. There was no health for all. Then the WHO slogan has now changed to universal health coverage. WHO now realizes that we cannot give health, cannot be distributed to everybody, but let us give health care for all. And now what happened, the COVID pandemic, the countries with access to the best health care, they have been, struggling and suffering even more than people who did not have that much access to health care, like the United States, Italy, during the first wave. And even now you can see Europe is facing a big surge in COVID-19 in spite of access. So this is where, if Ayurveda were to give a slogan for the future, it would be health intelligence for all. We cannot give health. We cannot package and give health. It is not enough even if we give health care to everybody. More and more hospitals coming is not really a sign of progress. More and more transplants being needed is not really a sign of progress. What is needed is health intelligence, food intelligence, life intelligence. And this is what Ayurveda is all about. Ayurveda, Ayushoveda, making life aware of itself. So health intelligence for all, this is the slogan, I think, through which Ayurveda will make a resurgence in this world. And Ayurvedic texts say that wherever there is life and wherever there is the intelligence in that life, there Ayurveda will be there. Wherever there is biodiversity and there is life, Ayurveda will be born there. When you look at the word Sanskrit, it's different from other names of other languages because they are all having a regional connotation. English for England, German for Germany, French for France, Hindi for Hindustani, Sanskrit for whom? It's just the refined speech. It's universal. Similarly, traditional Chinese medicine for China, traditional African medicine for Africa. But Ayurveda is knowledge of life. Wherever there is life, there is Ayurveda. So one beautiful thing is that I believe that we did not change Ayurveda to TIM, traditional Indian medicine, because that would be philosophically wrong. Ayurveda has always had a global outlook. Lokaha samastaha sukhino bhavantu. And the way Ayurveda has to spread globally is also what I would call as global localization. This is a philosophy of Ayurveda. Think globally, but act locally. So if you are in America, then you need to live according to the nature around you there. If you are in India, we know that Kerala is different, Tamil Nadu is different, every state, every region is different. And Ayurveda tells that every 12 yojanas, everything changes. We have to customize. And that is the idea, this grand vision of a global outlook and local action. That is the philosophy of Ayurveda. That is the knowledge of life. And I think that this is one of the greatest contributions that the Indian civilization has made. And it is one of the few living aspects of our tradition. And that's every Indian, it's our birthright to know and benefit from this knowledge. So I think with this, I will conclude. Yeah, there are just maybe one or two more points. One point is also just wanting to show you that sometimes the knowledge in our tradition is, you can read it. There are many, many such additional points that I put in the slides. One is about genetic information. Ayurveda was one of the earliest medical systems to think about medical genetics. Ayurveda says that there are 3 levels of genetic coding. Everything that we are in our body is coded in our bija, or today this would correspond to the genome. So you can see the idea of a genome is proposed in Ayurvedic texts so many thousands of years to the concept of bija, which is the blueprint for the whole body. And that bija has many parts, bija bhagas, each coding for different regions of the body. And that Bija Bhaga can be further subdivided into Bija Bhaga Avayava, which codes for specific organs. And Ayurveda is telling so many thousands of years ago that if any Bija Bhaga Avayava is damaged, then that particular organ will be damaged when that child is born. So this is one of the earliest ideas about genetic diseases. Ayurveda also talks about microorganisms which you cannot see with the eye, and talks about how they can cause pathological conditions. And they are classified into different types. So even if you look at the history of medicine and science, Ayurveda has very interesting things to offer. Ayurveda was one of the earliest medical systems to talk about surgery, to talk about anatomical dissection. Sushruta describes how the dead body should be dissected, and you should learn anatomy directly by observation. So I think I will stop here, and we can take a few questions. There are many more slides I've included. That's because I was also requested that there should be reading material. So reading material is provided in two forms. One is the extended slides, more than what I've discussed. And the second is a list or a link where you can identify some books. And I would also like to suggest that you read. This is easy to procure the books on Ayurveda by Professor M.S. Vidyapeetham. He was a cardiovascular surgeon, and he developed a lot of walls, and he had a very illustrious career as a cardiovascular surgeon. And later he has spent his remaining life, and he's still doing it in the study of Ayurveda. So he has written a modern rendering of the classical Ayurvedic books, which would be very interesting reading material. I thought I will discuss this, so I did not include it in that list so that I can introduce. So his books are called The Legacy of Charaka, The Legacy of Sushruta, and The Legacy of Vakpada. So these are books worth reading, and they're all available, for purchase. They can be purchased online or from bookshops. They are quite widely circulated. So this is a modern clinician, surgeon's rediscovery of Ayurveda. And Professor M.S. Vidyapeetham was always telling why he came to Ayurveda, because when he was reaching the pinnacle of his career as a cardiovascular surgeon, he suddenly realized that everything in medicine we are borrowing and importing from outside. What is it that India is still not able to make an impact in the world of science or medicine? Why is that so? And that is how he was led to study our own traditions. And he believed that unless as Indians we go to our roots, we start exploring Ayurveda, we cannot make original contributions to the world of medicine. And that is why he has actually, taken up this task of introducing Ayurveda to Indians itself, to show us what medical legacy we have. And not only we have a great history of Ayurveda, but we can also make further history. Once, when I was first invited to the UK at the Wellcome Institute for the History of Medicine, there was a Westerner who jokingly, he was just taunting me, pulling my leg, saying that, this is the best place to come for Ayurveda because this is a history of medicine institute and Ayurveda is history. I was very young at that time, a little rush of blood in my veins. So I immediately said, no, Ayurveda has created history, continuing to create history, and will continue to create history. So your job is not done. But today, I can tell with great confidence that this is very much a possibility. That with people like Professor M.S. Vidyapeetham and many institutions working on Ayurveda research, the time may come where we can bring Ayurveda and modern science together and continue to contribute in original ways for the further development of medicine. And M.S. Vidyapeetham calls his whole concept as Ayurveda biology. How Ayurveda can enrich biology and how biology can enrich Ayurveda. So with that, let me conclude, and the remaining time we can use for some discussion.
Thank you so much, Rammanohar ji. It was a really beautiful session. I think all of us, not just with the concept of Ayurveda, but I think with the very concept of life itself, it brings so much delight through, the study and practice of Ayurveda. Thank you so much. We've got a couple of questions, and Dr. Mansi ji, would you like to unmute yourself? Mansi ji, we are not able to hear you, though you are unmuted. Would you like to type in your question in the chat box? Okay, maybe we can go ahead. Dr. Kayal ji, please go ahead.
So it was a very wonderful session, sir. And I am a biomedical engineer, sir. And in our course, we first start with anatomy and physiology. We refer to books like Guyton and Hall. Is it necessary for us to revamp the whole anatomy and physiology with aspects of Ayurveda? Don't you think it should be the main book? Because even in MBBS or biomedical engineering, Guyton and Hall, those books are used as a reference or the study material. What do you think about it?
Yeah, because Ayurveda anatomy also has its limitations. What we have is the synthetic view. Details are sometimes missing. So I personally feel that Ayurveda provides a good framework, to reorganize the anatomical and physiological knowledge into a more comprehensive framework. We could use the details from modern anatomy, but put it within this, Srishti Sharira, Garbha Sharira framework, and then we would have these are the kind of activities that as Indians we could do, because by bringing our tradition, because Ayurveda needs to be modernized, it needs to be made contemporary. And if this is what I was telling about also as MS Valiathan saying that Greek medicine, when it got modernized, it became modern medicine. Every system, their own roots, they modernize. And modernization is very much part of our idea of progress. Even in our religious traditions, we always used to bhakti. Everywhere we had new acharyas coming and new avishkaranas of the old traditions. And that is very much called for in Ayurveda. I think it will be mutually beneficial. And from India, we can make this contribution. That's what I feel. But for this, we need collaboration between Ayurveda experts and modern, scientists and medical doctors.
Yes. So then one more question. The predictive medicine, which books do we refer to? You were telling about the predictive nature.
Yeah, unfortunately, the knowledge in Ayurveda is still in the classical text codified. This is a task that we have to do to bring it into a form that can be presented as predictive medicine. Now you may need to consult an Ayurveda physician personally, and depending on his skill, he may be able to give you some advice. But today, because the 3 PPP, as they call it, predictive, preventive, and promotive medicine, that is emerging as a new branch. And so a lot of this Ayurvedic knowledge needs to be reinterpreted. The problem in India is, we have a system which is pluralistic, where we allow different medical systems to exist, but we don't allow their cooperation. There is no cooperation. There is actually conflict. And this is the sad part of India in modern times. India is the only country where Ayurveda has a legal status, but we are in a conflict with the modern medical system. So if we can bring these two things together, then I think we will be able to make a lot of new innovations in medicine and new developments that can make us even leaders in many areas of medical development.
Thanks a lot, sir. And I would like to take the steps in this, sir. Thanks for this insight.
Thank you.
Professor Pankaj ji, if you would like to go ahead.
Ji, Namrata ji, am I audible?
Yes, sir. You are audible.
Namaskar. Sir, Namaskar, Rammanohar sir. It was really a wonderful session. I have learned so many things. Actually, I've been president of a health university, that is IHMR University in Jaipur. And we were working very closely with the WHO also. And WHO has added, as you know, not only the mental, emotional, and physical aspect, but also the spiritual health. So, and we happened to meet one person, and he gave a very good definition of swast is, swa mein sthit. But, and also you've rightly said, not only going for a treatment of it, but how we can go for the prevention of the whole thing. So, sir, इसमें क्या है कि जो स्व में स्थित वाला है, like, when people are going into abhav, prabhav, but not living in swabhav and swadharma. And as you mentioned that, कि जैसे high blood pressure का भी है, that how you can change by that ahar, vihar, vichar, vishwas. तो इन चीजों को कैसे हम और पॉपुलर करें सर, क्योंकि even in the name of Ayurveda also there are so many YouTube यूनिवर्सिटी का ज्ञान चल रहा है, कहीं कुछ चल रहा है, तो अगर कुछ authentic way में and also the dissemination in the right way which the people will be able to understand, it can be a great service. और हम लोगों ने सर एक प्रोग्राम किया था in the palace of माउंट आबू, उनके राजा ने हम लोग को होस्ट किया था, यहाँ पे स्वामी अग्निवेश जी और बहुत सारे वैद्य लोग आए थे. उसमें भी पता लगता है कि 4-5 वैद्य लोग बेचारे मर भी गए. तो lot of big knowledge is getting destroyed, sir. तो my suggestion is how to make it very contemporary, the authentic source. और जो हमारे वैद्य लोग जो धीमे धीमे खत्म से हो रहे हैं, उनकी knowledge को कैसे किया जाए, sir? That is my humble request. Thank you.
Yes, I know it is a challenging task, and it can only unfold through a process. It will not happen overnight. The problem why it is getting delayed is, right from the colonial period, even before that, there has been a lot of challenges for the Ayurvedic community. Unfavorable policies. Ayurveda, even today, people are coming to study Ayurveda because, they don't get other options. If you don't, first of all, invest intellectually into the system, it will not grow. This is a very big challenge. The people who come are, the least motivated. Now things are changing. But when we were students, I was part of an educational experiment where after SSLC, we were taken to study Ayurveda. Because after 12th, everybody will try for modern medicine. And only if they fail, they will come to Ayurveda. And by the time you study Ayurveda, people are trying to still get admission for modern medicine. So the problem is basically at the education level. And in North India, you can see many of the Ayurveda physicians are practicing Western medicine, even today. Especially in many village areas, rural areas, they are practicing Western medicine. So unless the Ayurvedic system is empowered right at the level of education, you will not be able to create. Now, one of the challenges for the common man is they tell Ayurveda is fine, but how to find a good Ayurveda physician? Because many people are engaged in commercial activities. It is less regulated in Ayurveda than in modern medicine. In India, the system of implementation is very, very poor. So at multiple levels, the change has to happen. But if we want to facilitate this, to make this go faster, I think what we need is a multidisciplinary effort. That the developing Ayurveda should not be the responsibility of only the Ayurvedic community. We have to own this as our heritage. And we must have people from all walks of life involved in the development of Ayurveda, especially collaboration between modern scientists and traditional systems of medicine. Unless this collective approach comes. Today now, we have a very impoverished community which is struggling for its own survival. When you study a BMS course or come out, Ayurveda physician is only focused on how he can survive. He has no, background or the opportunity to think about developing the system. Opportunities are less, funding is less. So unless we make it as a national, goal or agenda, and unless everybody says this is for our, growth, and what is good in Ayurveda should be accepted. Many things are outdated. They should be eliminated. That kind of a discrimination is also necessary. That kind of an updation and making it contemporary. I think that is the way to move forward. And perhaps these kind of events will spread more awareness, more people will get involved, and then we can facilitate this whole process of transformation. These are the thoughts that come to my mind.
Thank you, sir.